All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Nobody Culture live show. I am super excited about today's conversation. Welcome to the Nobody Culture live show, Dr. Erik Reis.
Thank you, Sejal. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here as well, too, because I get to hang with you.
I know. Well, look, it has been the most humbling experience, and it's been just so amazing. When I was preparing for this, I thought I knew a lot about you already, and then I learned so much more about all of the inspiring things you've accomplished in your career. So for everybody that's watching, let me just give you a little bit of background about this incredible human that we're going to be listening and learning from today. Dr. Erik has spent literally the last decade of his life helping people to change their brains and to change their lives. I mean, through his clinical experience, he's gained a deeper understanding of the brain and the complexities of the brain and the magic behind the individual differences that we all possess. So as a director of health and wellness at Nobody Studios, as a co-founder, his main focus is to attract unique individuals who think differently to solve some of the world's most complex problems and build innovative startups. I don't know about you, but I've worked with a lot of companies in my career, and I haven't seen anybody with that kind of focus, Dr. Erik. So I'm so glad that you're on our team. So for those of the people that are listening to this that don't know you, like I've gotten to know you over the last couple of years, can you tell us a little bit about sort of your background and maybe share a key turning point in your life that has gotten you to where you are today?
Yeah, thanks, Sejal. I thank you for that amazing introduction. I'll make sure to give you your payment after this as well. So, yeah, to be fair, like I've I've been so fortunate to have spent the last decade working with patients and working with patients from all walks of life, who in some way, shape, or form have had you know problems with their health, right? What structurally, neurologically, metabolically, emotionally, even spiritually. Like it's a yes and conversation. It's fully encompassing. But I think the biggest takeaway for me, and I was telling somebody about this on a conversation we were having the other day, is my perspective about the capacity and capability that we have as humans has completely changed. Like, I've seen people who've been diagnosed with conditions that were told like you're stuck this way, you're left this way. We don't have any other options for you. And yet, by understanding the brain and the body and really digging deep and understanding the human, the person in front of you, you can find so many opportunities to help people. And whether it's clinically, whether it's in business, whether it's with a family member, or whether it's in any other aspect of your life, like the brain is truly like unlimited in its capacity to be able to grow, change, and adapt. And I think taking that furthermore, what it's made me realize too is that if I truly want to help people, the best way to do that is to help as many people as possible. And I was limited on how many people I could help in the clinic based off of time and staffing and hours in the day. Whereas by building companies, we can help so many people in so many different ways because building a business is scalable, especially with what we're doing at Nobody Studios. And that's really why I was so attracted to the journey when Mark and I started talking and you came in the early stages and we were all having these discussions about what can we do to help people update their software. And for me in the health and wellness space, that's exactly what I think we literally need to do. And as you and I have started talking and having discussions, we've started talking about, well, how do we dig the well before we need it? What does this look like in the early stages for even hiring people, even bringing, fellow nobodies into the studio who might feel like they're different. We want those people, and that's such an advantage. And I know that you have a lot of opinions and perspectives on that too. So I'm going to throw it over back to you. Like, I'd love for people to kind of learn a little bit more about your background and what brought you to Nobody Studios as well, because you have an amazing background as an attorney, converted to a consultant, and speaking on all the topics that you've done. I feel like you and I are just nonconformists that have been fortunate enough to find a community that's willing to accept us. So I think it'd be great to share your perspective because you and I just go hand in hand back and forth with each other, and it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, it's the same thing like you. It's like I talked about this yesterday on my live. Is like one of the first conversations I had with our chief nobody, Mark McNally, was that I asked him. I go, these are some pretty big shoes you're asking me to fill, because I knew how important culture was for him.
Yeah.
As a startup at this early stage, to be having a conversation with somebody to say, I want you to come in and help us with this. I really was like, why are you so passionate about this? And why do you think I'm going to be the right person for this? And his answer was so simple to me. It was like, I know you want to help people. And what you just said goes right along with that, is that we truly want to help people, and we want to do it in a big way, right? And
Yeah.
so today we're here to talk about such an important conversation about why is neurodiversity a competitive advantage, and why do we embrace it at Nobody Studios? Because I remember when you reached out to me and you said, I really want us to focus on this with culture. Let's get together. Let's start to brainstorm. And so before we dig deep into what we're doing at the studio and why we're doing it, let's start off with just, again, I love to get definitions out of the way. This is something that's just been with my law training. Everybody defines neurodiversity. There's so many different definitions to it. So can you just share with us, what is your definition of neurodiversity? And then why is it such a hot topic? Why should we care about it, especially in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I think my definition of it is really just going to be based off of my experience. I by no means will say I have a formal definition of it, but in the context of, taking that term neurodiversity, it really, in some way, shape, or form, means individuals who are, quote unquote, not common, or outside of the norm that we would expect, right? Maybe these are people who, have different perspectives of things, right? So in a lot of the conversations that you and I have had with people who have been given the neurodiverse label, we'll say, because that's kind of what it is, right? And with that regards, a lot of them have been labeled with things like dyslexia, ADHD, right? Like common, diagnoses medically, but you don't necessarily formally need to have that. I would say for a neurodiverse individual, it's just somebody who thinks differently. And I guess my coming back to that is like, why is that such a bad thing? It's such an amazing thing. And this is something that I really think is going to be a really strong aspect of what we're building at the studio. Is, yes, we have an audacious, mission of building 100 companies in 5 years. But the even more amazing thing about that is the people that we're going to attract to the journey and how we get there, right? So yes, we have a goal, but how are we actually going to get there? By taking action, because I'm a big believer that actions speak louder than words. By finding those individuals, by giving them a home, by appealing to them and saying, listen, you can have a home here at Nobody Studios when other organizations may not have made you feel like home, right? I love that aspect. And you're so passionate about it that it just kind of fuels my fire, and we kind of feed off each other in this. And so for me, neurodiversity is really such a benefit, and it's such an advantage for us as a studio, because it's going to allow us to think differently. I was thinking about this the other day because I knew this was coming up. I was like, what's a good example of this? And so I was thinking, because I've talked to a couple of people who have dyslexia, and commonly, medically speaking, dyslexic individuals might have issues with reading. So this would be the kid who struggles with reading, but maybe they're brilliant. So like Bob Weir from the Grateful Dead, one of the greatest guitar players of all time, is dyslexic, and that's why he went into music. He's a genius, but he struggled in school with reading, right? So we label them with these these terms, but we're limiting people based off of their label. And for me in medicine, that was a hard thing. You're not the diagnosis you've been given. You're the individual that's sitting in front of me. It's the same thing for neurodiversity. So what's an advantage for us as well, too, is somebody who looks at a document who might be dyslexic might confuse a couple of things and maybe have a different perspective or interpretation of that. And maybe their take on that is actually more beneficial for the bottom line and proceeding a company forward than it is of us having the formal standard thing of everybody saying, oh, this is exactly what it is. So, there are a couple different conversations about the term neurodiversity, and by no means will I say I know the formal one, but to me, it's such an advantage for us. And I know you're a big believer in this too. So Sejal, I'm curious to hear like what your take is on it. And I would like to kind of ask you the question of, in your perspective, like, why do you think this is going to be such an advantage for us, especially as our chief culture officer? Because I know you're passionate about this topic just as I am.
I'm sure people are feeling my passion like off the screen. Like this is absolutely, well, I read this metaphor somewhere in an article, and it really kind of stuck with me. And what it said was like, if you think about people like puzzle pieces, right? We're all irregularly shaped. And oftentimes we see this over and over again. Companies are asking people to kind of change themselves. So they turn into this perfect square. So it's easier to fit you in because you're perfectly aligned when you're culturally fit with us, right? And it's easier to fit you in. And I love that we're taking the exact opposite approach. Let's flip that script, right? We don't want to ask people to trim away their irregularities. We want to actually send a different message, which is that we value your differences, and we know that we're going to need your differences to help us innovate and build 100 compelling companies in the next 5 years. There's just no way that's going to happen. And just one more thing I want to add to what you said. And like, you're just so brilliant. And I just wanted to highlight for people what you said, because you said it really quickly. And for you, this is like everyday sort of stuff. But for those of us that aren't brain experts, right, like you are, I just want to highlight for people that neurodiversity is just literally, the way that I look at it, is that there's differences in the brain that are causing people to interact differently in the world, right, in different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing or a negative thing. It doesn't mean it's a deficit in the brain function. It's just that people are different in the way that they socialize, learn, and perform certain tasks, right? And so everybody, to some extent, is, and this is a term I guess I've learned that is favored by neurodiverse people, is differently abled. Mm-hmm. Because we're all born differently, we're all raised differently, right? And so I remember the first conversation. I'm going to give a quick shout out to Perry Noppert, right? The founder and CEO of the Octopus Movement. And then I want to give a shout out to Summer Watson, my good friend, for introducing me to Perry. When I spoke with him the first time, I remember he told me that he was starting this movement of non-linear thinkers.
Yeah, I think brilliant.
I know. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, you're nobody. And I need to introduce you to our chief nobody. Because like you said, we want people who think outside of the box and produce novel solutions to these problems. Can you share a couple of, you were already starting to do this earlier, but I think for people to understand this a little bit more, can you give a couple examples of specific skills that neurodiverse people might have that could be an advantage for us at the studio?
Yeah, I mean, the first one is just thinking, right? So we're currently right now, one of the big focuses that we're really revamping and working on. I'm going to give a shout out to my good friend, Min Bogata. Min is this brilliant executive who spent the last 25 years at Deloitte, and he has such an amazing skill set, and he's a true leader, in my opinion. Building out the Idea Lab hasn't been easy, right? It's like, how do you structure an aspect of our company where we're intaking ideas and we make it streamlined and we vet the process and bring the best ideas to the top? Even just thinking critically has been a super important aspect to that. And I think one of the beautiful things about the culture that we've built at Nobody Studios already is that we're allowed to disagree with each other. We're allowed to have open discussions about, oh, I like this. Actually, Sejal, maybe we can think of something this way. Maybe we can try it this way. Or, yeah, I like your idea better than mine. Let's go with that. Like, the humility is such an important piece. So the first thing for me is like, how do we think differently, right? So I was just looking on my phone a minute ago. I love this Einstein quote, right? So the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. We have to, in some way, shape, or form, change the way we think about problems. And in order to do that, we have to get people in the room who think differently. So number one, just the thought process alone is an advantage to us. But then even number two, right? The experiences that these individuals bring to the table can be a massive game changer for us as well too, right? Because if you're in different industries and different sectors, you can bring a different perspective to the table. We would be failing and misleading ourselves if we thought that every single person, or if I thought every single person coming to the studio to do health and wellness had to have a health and wellness background. I will tell you that is exactly what I don't want. Now, we need people to be knowledgeable and educated to be able to help us, guide, different discussions. But at the end of the day, this internal inherent like cross-pollination effect that we're building into the studio is something that I strongly believe in as well, because a company that we're creating in the health and wellness space could be a really viable solution for something in fintech or real estate. And if we don't have those discussions, if we don't have those critical thinkers to come into the scene and help us find those solutions, then we're missing out on a lot of stuff. So I think those two big things are the ones for me. And Sejal, I know you have opinions about those too. So I'd love to get your take on where you think that neurodiverse kind of component would come in and really be an advantage for us as a studio as well. Because we've talked this, for multiple discussions that we've had in the past. I know you have a couple examples as well.
I mean, I love everything you just said. I think that when to me, it's very simple. I always like to simplify these very like complex conversations, right? It's like what we're saying is like, we're going to expect our leaders at Nobody Studios to embrace the fact that everybody is going to be different. They're going to be irregular pieces of puzzles, and that we're going to have to value each other as unique individuals. So yes, it means that our leaders are going to have to work harder. Yes, it means we're going to have to invest more in training and educating and putting all these processes in place. But the payoff is considerable, right? That means we're going to have access to certain talents that other organizations don't have with different perspectives. So that means our companies are going to be compelling. And then at the end of the day, even if you go beyond that, it's going to benefit all of us, because when you leverage all of your employees through this kind of greater sensitivity to understand and recognize individuals' needs, what does that do? That's almost like forces us to get to know each other better, so that we know how to manage. Right? Like, get to know each other, make time and be present, and get to connect with each other. I mean, think about it. Like, if you were to call me up, I know you. I know enough about you. I am a huge fan of yours. If you were to call me up on a weekend and say, Sejal, I am drowning here, I need some help, am I going to have your back? 100%. I am there for you. But if I don't know you at all, we haven't connected at all, and you call me up and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm spending time with my kid this weekend, right? But that's the thing. And so, yes, the topic is neurodiversity, but it goes even beyond that, is understanding each other. We're all different from each other, right?
Absolutely. Well, and there's such a massive benefit to that too. I mean, anybody who's working in the workforce or even in HR knows the scary statistics about employee turnover, about employee onboarding, right? I mean, there are so many ways to mitigate lost dollars or even lost revenues just by onboarding people and giving them a home, which is the fact that we're even having this discussion in 2023 is a bit mind-boggling to me, to be fair. But there's so many advantages to having that, and more importantly, too, we should be working to live, not living to work. Now, I think you and I would argue, like, I thoroughly enjoy what I get to do every day. Like, this is not a job for me. If I didn't have any benefit from this outside of what I get psychologically, I would still do this, right? So there's so much to be said about that, and to have people who believe in what we're doing, but also they feel at home, like they're going to be more engaged psychologically, right? So just to go into a little bit about how the brain works is, like, when you're stressed out, when you're having a moment of fear or panic or anxiety, you actually shut down areas of your brain that help you to critically think. So what is that going to do for your work? What is that going to do for your motivation? What is that going to do for your emotionality towards your employees, team building? I mean, it's going to have a massive effect, and it does to every major organization. It's just they brush under the rug, or they say, oh, we don't have that problem here yet. Employees leave, there's internal discussions. And so what we want to do is we want to facilitate that sense of belonging, because you can activate these amazing areas of the brain that empower people to stay focused, to drive, to go work at a problem a little bit longer, and they feel like they belong. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is, we talk about culture, but Sejal, you and I have gone back and forth on this. When we create our culture manifesto, or we create different components of, like, how are we going to build our culture? Things on paper, awesome, great, we get to check the box. To me, the actions will always speak louder than words, and our ability to execute, our ability to bring people in, to accommodate, to build things, to make sure we have that. Talk to us in a year, talk to us in 5 years. Like, that is going to be the true litmus test for us. And I know you, and I like to think I know myself a little bit too. I know we'll be successful with that. And I'm excited to build a home where people literally are knocking on our door trying to get in because they want to be a nobody. Like, that to me makes it feel like if we can do that, or when we do that, we know we've actually accomplished success.
Yes. And so we've talked a lot about why it's a good thing, which is like a no-brainer, right? You like that joke, no-brainer? I'm going to throw a couple of those in there. But so why have so many companies like shied away from this, or why are they not taking on people with the skills that we all know they badly need? So can you share some of the steps that Nobody Studios is doing right now to make sure that we are neurodiversity friendly? What are some of the things that we're doing? And I'll kind of tag team with you on this answer, but go ahead and kind of walk us through some of the things that we're doing right now to make sure that we do bring those people in, that we get that talent in the door, so we can build our 100 companies in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're even doing this, right? I think the fact that we're even talking about this, we're putting ourselves out there. We're to a point putting a target on ourselves, saying, "Oh, this company is talking about this." Like that means we're going to have people come to us. To we've aligned heavily with the Octopus movement, who is full of people who are neurodiverse and have these different backgrounds, and we've had so many discussions with them, and they're becoming very vital partners of ours because there's just such an alignment there, right? Then the third thing too is you and I in the background have been having a lot of meetings with companies and organizations who are specifically focused on staffing and providing jobs for those who are have been given the neurodiversity label, I guess. And I don't know if that's appropriately correct, but how to describe that. But I'll just use it in that context. So we're trying to figure out what this process looks like. One of the stats that really stuck out with me, and I forget who we were having this meeting with, it might have been Inclusively, where we were talking, and the gentleman who was giving us the kind of tutorial said most of the accommodations for organizations for individuals can be accomplished, like a majority of them, for like less than $500 total. Right?
Yeah.
And yet how many organizations are actually going out and just making sure they have that? Things like, hey, do you want to do your interview in person or would you prefer to have it remote, right? One of those should be an option. Maybe if we ask you questions, it's easier for you to respond on paper than it is to have face-to-face. Even having things to help people with their hearing or having them be able to follow along in a different context. Things for me that are relevant and important is when I'm doing presentations. Some people might have more appeal to see things visually, or maybe they're better listeners or learners when they're hearing things from an audio standpoint. There's so many simple tactics that we can use, that we should use. And so for me, I think that those are some of the big things that you and I are really looking into is like, well, what does this system look like? How do we build it? And how do we start putting it together? And then as we start getting people coming in, it's literally as simple as saying, hey, can you give us your feedback? What was your process like? How can we get it to be better? And not to be saying, this is exactly how it is. We're stuck this way and it's good to go. So I think for me, the proof will be in the pudding, but those are a couple tactics that I'm really excited about and that I'm optimistic about. Sejal, what about you? I know that you probably have a different perspective on that too.
No, I've really enjoyed brainstorming with you. And I think the one thing that you and I realize is that this is a big thing that we're taking on, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to require money. It's going to require time. It's going to require us rolling our sleeves up and really understanding and getting to the bottom of the recruitment piece, right? It comes down to the way we can find these individuals and recruit them and make the decision to not only bring them in, but then how are we going to support them, right? Because these are the individuals. I mean, when you look at the unemployment rates and you look at the numbers, we're like, this is an untapped market of people who are very talented, who have the skills that we need, yet they struggle to fit the profiles that companies are looking for. So like the interview we had with, the meeting we had yesterday, right? With Amelia Hogan and her team, like those stories, when you hear from people who are neurodiverse and you hear about how they're being treated differently by companies simply because they don't make eye contact in a meeting or because they're overly honest about their weaknesses, or they might go off on conversational tangents during the conversation. Well, this is just how their brain is wired. That doesn't mean they're not able to help us create new companies, right? But you can notice a typical interviewer, not like us, who's open to this conversation, who's going to zone out and say, oh, this person's going off on this tangent. They're not going to be able to focus. Well, no, that's not true. They're not able to focus during the interview, but that doesn't mean they're not able to focus on the project or the company that they're building. So looking at ways like you and I have been doing, how do we streamline Nobody Studio's interview process and onboarding process to make sure that it's inclusive, right?
Yeah. Well, I think honestly, like I said earlier, I think just this is the first step. We're looking for those people. I mean, we're being very verbal and very active and very open with that. I can't tell you how many people that I've just even met from these LinkedIn lives and even Facebook lives. We broadcast this on Twitter and on YouTube, where we're meeting people who are coming out and kind of saying, hey, I really resonate with the story that you've been telling. I've been fired from a job before. I've been let go from a job before because I have this tendency, and my former coworkers and former business employer didn't really like that, or they said it was too much, or they said it was, not enough for the role. And I think when I hear those stories, I resonate a lot with that because I heard similar stories from the patients that I saw when they would go see different medical providers and they would kind of just be pushed aside, or there would be a lot of negating, or there really wasn't any consideration into trying to ask the hard questions to get the answers people were truly looking for. And I think for me, that kind of just instills hope to say we're onto something, right? So when, if we're just going to be like everybody else, then we're going to get the same results as everybody
Mhm.
else. If we want to challenge the status quo, we actually have to do that in every single component of what we're doing as a studio and as a company. And I believe that we are doing that. To usher some of the comments that have been going on LinkedIn as well too, Gord Sherwood, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, but I love some of the things you've been saying. It's like, these are things that can happen. They're just
Mhm.
not simple to do, right? But that
Right.
doesn't mean that they can't happen. They can't happen over time. And with hard work, this could be a great opportunity for a lot of individuals to find a place that they could call home. I think that's what's exciting for me because I want to learn from these people. I've had the pleasure of having some amazing friends who have been labeled neurodiverse or dyslexic or have ADHD. I mean, I have some of those tendencies as well too. Like I have a hard time sitting still. I have a hard time not wanting to do things and shiny thing moments. But
Mhm.
that's also been an advantage for me with my career. And I'm so grateful that I was never put into a category, into a box, or into a corner. I feel as though those individuals that have, unfortunately, they haven't tapped their true potential. And I would love to meet them. I'd love to learn from them, and I would love to grow with them. I think that, what people are really looking for in an employer is they're looking for somebody to allow them to grow to the person that they were destined to be.
Mm.
And I feel as though what we're creating at Nobody Studios, we're facilitating that process in every single aspect. And you can become the nobody that somebody thought you never actually could be. I really do genuinely resonate with that message, especially in the cultural component. And Sejal, you've been an idea champion on this from day one. And I really believe that's what Mark saw in you too, is that you were one of the first people to come into the studio just to literally shape our culture from day one. And that's powerful for anybody watching, let alone me being an internal nobody and being like, oh, this is really cool. So I'd love to hear a little bit from you, Sejal, as to some of the steps that you would like to see us implement and that you have planned for us to implement over the next couple of months and years as well. Because I know this will be a process and it won't just be where, here we are today because we're building the plane as we fly it, right? So I'm curious to get your feedback
Yeah.
on some of that.
Absolutely. Look, I know we're getting close to the end, but some of the things that I think I know that we have talked about is we know we're going to have to use non-traditional, non-interview based assessment and training processes, right? So, for example, maybe we create like comfortable gatherings for neurodiverse job candidates to demonstrate their abilities and casual interactions with their team leads, right? Because we're going to have teams all over the globe. That's the
Yeah.
goal of all of this. We know we're going to have to do training of our recruiters, of our hiring team, of our team leads and our managers so they know how to be inclusive. We know we're going to have to do unconscious bias training and advise people on microaggressions because it's easy when you see someone who's different than you to make these statements even without knowing it that might be harmful to that individual, right? You and I have talked about establishing relationships with nonprofits, with other community sort of services and organizations that are qualified to be able to support these neurodiverse folks once they get into the studio, because that's the piece, right?
Yeah.
We need to set up a support system for these individuals. We can't just bring them in and then be like, I think one of the things that is a huge benefit for us, Dr. Erik, is that we are global, that we are virtual. So some of those like things that maybe might have been restrictive or
Hmm.
not compatible with neurodiverse folks, they can work from their own home, right? And so they can get the setup, the accommodations that work for them. So I think we have a lot that we can do, and
Yeah.
I'm really excited to be working on this with you. And I know we're here at time, but before we end, for everybody that's watching, can you give us some? How can people get involved with the studio? What are some ways that they can bring their talent, neurodiverse talents? We welcome you to join our journey. What are some ways they can get involved with our studio?
Yeah, I think the first and the easiest way is to reach out, right? So whether you're listening to this live, whether you're listening to this as a recording, we've been relatively active to say the least on as many social media platforms as possible over the last couple of weeks and months. We've been screaming at the rooftops about what we're doing, what we're building, who we're trying to attract, and really what we're trying to build in the world, which is we're trying to de-risk early stage startups to build companies that can actually help people. And it's not just in healthcare. It's in fintech, it's in real estate, hospitality. We have a belief in Web3, green energy, like just developing software systems to help improve, a young founder's ability to create a beta product as quickly as possible. So, it's easy to just reach out, like ask us questions. We're relatively available. We're all relatively open to having discussions. And I think the other thing with it too is check out our website, right? Check out what we're building, check out who we are, check out some of the things that we've put out to the world, see if there's resonance. And if there is, then, if you're somebody who's interested in coming to the studio and you want to, work here, go to a talent roundtable. We have these, every week, if not every couple of weeks. If you're somebody who's like, I'm really keen on investing in Nobody Studios, we have a crowdfunding going on right now where the average, everyday person who isn't an accredited VC investor without $1 million portfolio and a massive Rolodex, we're allowing you to become, an investor in the studio, which really hasn't ever been done before. And I think that's really powerful. So, there are multiple ways to get involved with the studio. And I think that's what makes us unique, is that it's really a yes and conversation. Most people are like, I want to do everything. And that's when it gets really fun, I guess. But there's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of ways to get access to us. And like I said, we're really easy to, get in contact with. So reach out, take the first step. We would love to have a conversation with you. We want to learn from you. We want to, ask you questions. And at the end of the day, we really do want to, build companies, because we truly believe that Nobody Studios, that the best companies have yet to be created. And I know in the health and wellness space, I have a firm belief in that as well. So, Sejal, I'm curious to hear anything else that you would like to add to that on top of that, what I said.
No, you covered it all. The only thing I'll add is, look, go to Republic, invest. Somebody asked me the question the other day. They're like, is my $100 going to make a difference? And I'm like, yes, it is going to make a difference, because this isn't about, look, if we wanted to raise money, there are easier ways to do that than do an equity crowdfunding campaign. But having people, regardless of the amount of money, be a part of this journey is part of our strategy. Yeah. We are crowd infused. It's not about the dollar amount as much as it is that you have skin in the game now, and you're going to care about and remind us to stay true to what we're trying to do here, which is to create a place, as Dr. Erik said, of belonging for all individuals, but also give an opportunity and access to people that may not have had it, like me. I didn't have $100,000 sitting in my bank account, and I've never invested before Nobody Studios. And this is one of the reasons why I joined the journey, was because I've always looked for a place where I feel like I belonged, and that I can contribute my talent, my resources to help create all of these compelling companies. So join our journey, therepublic.com, Nobody Studios. Look at our website, follow us on LinkedIn, and we welcome you to this journey. Thank you so much, Dr. Erik, for sharing your brilliance with all of us today. Great seeing you.
Thanks for having me on here. I had just as much fun as you did. So thank you for inviting me. I appreciate this. I look forward to doing it again soon, hopefully, if we get some good responses. So
let's do this. All right.
I love it.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.